Good evening, FBCKC. Hey, welcome back tonight to our second part of our two-part study on between Good Friday and Easter. To kind of fill you in, like I said, tonight's the second part of this study. Tomorrow night we'll have Pastor Jeff back like normal. Thursday night we'll have Pastor Sean on, and then Friday night, y'all can't see it off to the side here, but I'm plugging away and finishing up the last of the touches on the Bow the Knee performance, so we can get that played. That'll begin Saturday night, or I'm sorry, Friday night at 6 o'clock. We'll kick that off and kind of get everybody a chance to see that again. Hey, I'm glad you are able to come back tonight. Last night, obviously, Francis Chan took us through the reports of Good Friday, took us actually around to some of the places that the Bible talks about present day there with his little walk, and covered up to the point of the crucifixion. Now, of course, we all know, I mean, the Christ or the cross is what gave us the victory, is what gave us victory over sin. The ultimate sacrifice of Jesus gave us that victory. But if that cross gave us the victory of the sin over sin, then his resurrection gave us victory over death. In raising Jesus from the dead, God actually gave us a living sacrifice who promised to remain with us, and that was through all of time. That was where we get our victory in both over the sin and over death. We have our living sacrifice. Let's go ahead and get started. Let's kick it off here with get Francis Chan on the second part, and we'll open it up for questions like before afterwards. And hopefully we won't have the problems we had last night.
So we are at the Garden Tomb right now. Most likely this isn't the tomb where Jesus was laid. In fact, we're pretty sure it wasn't, but it's a nice little garden and a good spot to remember it, because really no one knows exactly where that tomb was. But what I want you to do is just think about if you really believe in the resurrection of Jesus. I mean, if you believe everything we've taught through the book of Mark, and that Jesus died, and then he literally rose from the dead, and he says he is with us now. So he's here. He's with me. How should that affect you? How does that affect your life right now? Remember, at the crucifixion, when Jesus was turned over to the authorities, the disciples fled. And some of us look at that and go, well, I never would have left Jesus. You know, you're sitting on your sofa going, I would have been there with him. But do you understand what they were going through? First of all, they were thinking as they were heading into Jerusalem, we're going to take this over. They were so used, think about if you were a disciple, you are so used to winning. You're with Jesus, the religious leaders, he's fearless. He walks on water. He heals a paralytic. He doesn't care what other people think. He was in control of everything. And so now suddenly you went to the garden and you saw Jesus, troubled like never before. And then now you're heading into Jerusalem and you're seeing him being handed over, even though he told you that would happen. Imagine as he's being tortured and screaming, how difficult it would be for you going, this is the same guy that was walking on water. This is the guy that I saw on the mountaintop. There must have been a part of them that started to doubt and go, really? He's being tortured. He's being crucified. So what happened? You see, something happened that caused everything to change from them fleeing and being afraid. They saw Jesus rise from the dead. They saw the risen Christ. And this changes everything because they went from being fearful to Peter. Now you read about the rest of his life, and he's speaking so boldly. This Peter, remember, this is the book of Mark, is about Peter describing the events of how he denied Jesus. But everything changes. Why? Because Jesus rose from the dead. And now Peter is suddenly like fearless. You read about him in the book of Acts. He's getting beat up. In fact, tradition says that Peter himself was crucified upside down. He went through that torture. They say he didn't want to go through the same thing as Christ did. He didn't feel worthy of that, so they crucified him upside down. Why? Why would he go through that type of torture? Because when they saw Jesus rise from the dead, can you just imagine, try to imagine that moment. You and the disciples, you're discouraged, like the torture you're remembering. The Bible talks about how they couldn't even recognize him as a man anymore. This friend of yours was this piece of meat, and he's thrown into this tomb. And you're like, what just happened? I went from one day believing we were going to take over everything to he's crucified, and I still remember the shouts, the pain, the agony. And then you see him, and you go, oh, now he conquered death. Man, we saw him raise Lazarus from the dead, but now he himself rose from the grave. It gave them a confidence that changed everything. And what the Bible says is that the spirit of him who raised Christ from the dead now dwells in you. See, this should change everything in our lives. This is why we believe now that anything can happen in my life. I could be tortured for his sake, and I'll just take it. This should change the way we live our lives. Man, and also to believe that if that type of power that took that dead body that was in a tomb, mutilated, lifeless, and caused him to rise from the dead, that type of power is available to me? Seriously, what I want you to do right now is just take some time. Do this. Try to objectively think. If a human being believed that Jesus rose from the dead like that, and that his spirit now dwells in you and he is with that human being, how would that life change? How should that human being act? And then look at your own life and ask yourself, man, does my life look anything like that? And if not, then you've got to ask yourself, do I really believe? I'm back on the Mount of Olives because the book of Acts says this is where Jesus ascended back into heaven. And again, it's like all these scenes where you go, this is unreal. Like, what is that like to watch someone ascend back up at everything we've been looking at in the book of Mark? Man, my hope was that you would just see that this isn't just like a make-believe book. Like, these are real things that happen. But the idea was that you would love the scriptures. That's my hope. My hope is that you would look at this book and you would read the book of Mark over and over and over again, that this was just kind of a launch for you. I mean, honestly, this was the most difficult series I've ever done because so much of it, I felt like, gosh, this is too sacred. I want people just to read the Bible. It's kind of like if you're listening to an Adele song and I decide every time I'm going to sing along with her. I ruin it. And in the same way, that's what I feel about the scriptures. There's this purity. These are the words of God. And for you to just listen to the word of God alone without someone else's voice explaining it, that's our hope, is to create interest, that you would say, you know what? That study in Mark, I never saw those things. I got to go back. I got to read it myself because, look, we all know that there's false teachers out there. And there's people with agendas that will read a passage and then kind of spin it to their liking. And I'm not saying that you're learning under some false teacher, but They're all out there. Someone's got to be learning from them. Our hope is that you would get into the Word and that you would study it for yourself and go, no, what does it really say? Man, Jesus, his death, his sacrifice, his love, what should that do in me? He wants me to die to myself. He wants me to die for others. And the resurrection of Jesus Christ, if he's alive and here right now, how should that affect me? How much power do I have? These are the things you need to think about as you look through scriptures. And the fact that he says he's going to return one day, how are we going to be found when he returns? Look, I've been a pastor for 30 years. And every time I read this book, and I look around our country at people who call themselves Christian, and even myself at times, I go, man, do I get it? So I keep going back to this book and evaluating my life in light of what this says. And I pray that you do that. I pray that this is not, oh, I studied the book of Mark, but that this was a beginning for you, that you just can't get enough of Jesus and you can't get enough of the Gospels.
All right, so there he brought you on through Easter and the power of what we just witnessed there with knowing of Jesus' resurrection. Uh, some of the things that they sent us notes on to talk about are how do you think that resurrection changed the life of the apostles? Particularly Peter. I mean, he went into detail with Peter with all the punishment and sacrifice that Peter had to make. Um, it's how much dramatic knowing that resurrection, knowing those guys knowing the resurrection, seeing the resurrection, how much it changed their life and what they were willing to put themselves through because of that. Knowing that power, uh, and knowing that they had that living sacrifice that we talked about from the beginning. Um, like I said, from we want to open it up at this point. If there's any questions, I see we have several of the ministerial staff online as well to help answer if anything. And as always, it's if you're watching this at a later time or you come up with a question within your own studies. I mean, like Francis Chan said, um, uh, like Francis Chan said, this hopefully this is a start of getting you to look deeper into the scriptures, not just listen to somebody else, but actually get into it yourself. Uh, Dig down into those words and see what it all means. It's the Bible is such a wonderful book that it's different every time that you read it. Not seeing a whole lot of questions pop up. Eric, I think, is talking to Sean about the men's Bible study on Thursday night. So, um, but like I said, guys, if you have any questions, continue to post, continue to question. We're all watching. Make sure you tune in tomorrow night for Pastor Jeff. Uh, Thursday night for Pastor Sean, and of course, absolutely, we want the bow that knee. We want to get that out there again. That was such a powerful performance uh, by so many of you that are watching now, and uh, as well as others. So Thursday night at 6 p.m. Uh, is the men's Bible study from Pastor Sean. Tomorrow night, the youth will actually be on at 5 o'clock. For those of you that have youth uh, at home, get them in front of it. Get them in front of your account. Get them in front of something so they can see that our YouTube page. Whatever we need to do, Pastor Sean will be on there giving the youth message at that point. So, guys, this is the week of all weeks when it comes to our beliefs and our religion. Um, uh, this is where the ground that we stand on. And this is like I said at the beginning. This is our power over sin and our power over death. all comes from this point. This is Jesus' life culminates at this point. So definitely dig into that. Keep staying with us. And any other questions, pop them on here. We'll check them out. Guys, you have a good night, and we will. Don't forget tomorrow morning. Pastor Jeff from Grace Connection will be our guest speaker. We'll have him on here at 9 o'clock, so you won't want to miss that. Y'all have a good night.